right. So next, we're going to have a presentation from Mr. Rene Coda. And Mr. Coda is the founder and principal owner of CMG Alliance. He's a Marine combat veteran and has 15 years of experience working with government procurement. One of the things that he's been doing recently is working with the One LA initiative, which is a great project down in Southern California. And he has been leading a procurement piece of that where they are helping small businesses kind of walk through the process of how do you get government contracts. And so we thought that he would be a perfect presenter for this group in kind of understanding how you go about thinking about pursuing government work, putting together that bid and proposal. What are the key things that you should have in the back of your mind? And again, he's we encountered him, met him through the One LA initiative, and if you're in Southern California, I encourage you to look it up. So, Mr. Coda, thank you so much for being with us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Kevin, thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rene Coda. Like Kevin said, just to give you a little background about our firm and specifically what we do. We specialize in government contracting and specifically one step further in business development. So the way our firm was started in 2008, I was a Marine Corps veteran, got out of the Marine Corps and saw that there were opportunities, contracting opportunities to go back to the Middle East at that time and to really make a great amount of money as an employee. Well, the entrepreneur in me said, well, listen, if I'm going to be an employee at that level, why not look at managing some of those contracts and, to put it bluntly, not get shot at while performing on that contract. So that's how our firm was born. And we rolled it out, put together some proof of concepts, and really skyrocketed at that point. So what I want to be able to convey to you out there is really within the government contracting realm. And when I use the term government contracting, federal, state, municipalities, counties, utilities, whatever the case is really having a solid strategy and having the data to back up those decisions that you're making. Who are you going to target? What specifically are you going to agency are you going to target? What size of contracts do you target? And really that comes from back-end research, forecasting. Puda hit on it a little bit earlier on about some of the pre-bid meetings that are out there. Understanding and knowing when those are coming down the pipeline is extremely important for you, especially as a smaller, diverse business, to really understand where to focus your energy on. And that's what we do directly for our clients. So the majority of our clients are small business as well. So we have a couple of large and medium-sized business clients as well. So what occurred with the One LA initiative, specifically the LA Area Chamber of Commerce came to us and said, listen, can you do this and bottle this up for some of our participants down here? And we said, absolutely. You know, it looked like an easy process. And we run quite a few other different programs and different agencies throughout the country as well. But specifically with the One LA initiative, you know, we came in and said, listen, we've got some very high expectations, meaning we want companies to walk out of here with an actual contract, not just train them, not just show them how to do it, but to actually walk out with a contract. And the procurement portion of the program, we've done a portion of this that was training. The procurement side of the program should end by the end of next month. So by the end of the year, we're talking about a 4-month process, 20 participants in there. We should be just north of $10 million in contract awards for those participants. And these, you know, fill the entire spectrum from a company that was just starting out to some company that's got some past performance. So what I really am trying to convey to you, everybody out there that is looking and you've got some frustration on this side, tenacity is going to be the cornerstone of exactly what you need to have on the government contracting side, because it is not easy. It's going to tell you that, well, they're just handing out contracts because you're a DBE, DBBE, woman-owned, whatever the case is. I'm here to tell you they're not being as open as they should with you. And it is tough, and it should be tough, right? These are tax dollar contracts. So just understand, but there are the advantages out there. And this is where we as a firm really looked at and said, listen, how do you really take that, just make that a situation where your small business certification actually adds value? And if I could put it as plain as possible, it's this: look at the infrastructure of your business, look at the capacity, meaning if you can handle a $100,000 contract, what you need to be strategizing on is how do I handle a $1 million contract? And obviously, the majority of your business owners, you would sit back and say, well, I just need money, chicken or the egg. I needed a large contract to hire people. I can't hire people until I get a large contract. I would challenge you to somewhat think out of the box and say, okay, well, how do I get this done? Teaming agreements is a great situation and doesn't typically cost you any money, where you're looking at other, and they could be competitors, where you say, okay, let's look at a teaming or a partnership with a particular company that will be able to expand our capacity. Having a memorandum of understanding in place, meaning this: when you go to that agency and you say, listen, we're going to do $500,000 worth of work for you on the construction side, but we're prepared to go to 5 million. And here's how we're prepared. We have 3 partners that we've got an existing memorandum of understanding with, that when we get at capacity, we can take on more contracts, larger contracts, more sustainable contracts. And maybe it's bonding, where you've talked to your bonding agent. You said, listen, what about if we phase a particular contract? I've only got a $1 million bonding capacity with the $3 million aggregate, but I'm focused on $5 million contracts. Talking to your bonding contacts to say, listen, how do we get past this? Is it just financials? Can we phase that contract? Meaning, can you give me 4 different phases of $1 million contracts with that? And at the end, there's a lot of strategies on that side. So all that to say, I've got a very limited amount of time today, is it really boils down to strategy. So we're going to talk about proposals and bid submissions. And I did see that the majority, if we can go to the next slide, I did see that the majority of you were in the construction side. So majority of you may be sitting back and said, listen, Renee, it's low bid. Doesn't matter. I got to be the low bid on that. What I would challenge you to do is this, and I've heard this from companies, especially in the construction industry, where they'll tell me, well, Renee, it doesn't really matter. I got to keep my bodies working, so I'm going to underbid it at a loss. I'm telling you right now, that is a recipe for disaster. That is not something that you should really look at as a business model to be able to be sustainable, because you will get that contract, and if you providing on that contract at a loss, there's no good that's going to come out of that. You may keep those people working for a certain amount of time, but you got to have some sustainability. Now, maybe there's a trade-off, and we do this, especially in federal contracting, where we look at typical contracting situations and we consider it a loss leader. So a loss leader would be, okay, listen, we're going to do this, but we know that we're trying to knock over these dominoes over here because there's a relationship, but it's very specific, right? You're looking at something. So the example I could give you is, well, we're going to do this at a loss, but we need some past performance. We just want to get our foot in the door. What I would challenge you to do is have that next domino, know exactly what that looks like. Maybe it's at District 7, maybe it's at District 4, whatever it is, but you know for a fact, listen, I'm going to get this contract, but that is going to fall into this particular contract that we know that we're going to be more competitive on, whatever the case is. It boils down to strategy again. So back to the slide and really setting up the process. So what we do as a firm, and what we do for a lot of our participants that come into the 1LA program, is to sit them down and say, listen, what your business is just a conglomerate of processes. Now, the easier that you make those processes and you stack those processes one on top of the other, the more likely you are to actually have the wherewithal and the infrastructure to know that you're going to succeed. Here's a typical situation. Those of you who don't have any experience on the government contracting side, maybe Caltrans has been a target for years. And all you're doing is banging your head against the wall going, I can never get a Caltrans contract. I put together a bid, I'm never low priced, whatever the case is. The typical process of companies, especially smaller diverse businesses that don't have a process is this. You get a scope of work, you get excited, you look at it. Maybe it takes 4 or 5 days. Yes, I'm ready to go on this. You know, there's one portion here that we don't do this particular scope of work, but I could find somebody. Week 2, maybe you have some conversations that can actually help you on that particular scope of work. Week 3, you say, okay, now I've got to buckle down. Now, all this time you're running your business. All this time you're saying, okay, I've got other things I've got to do. I've got to make sure that, you know, the tidal wave doesn't hit us, but this opportunity is great. So week 3, you say, listen, I'm going to buckle down, pen to paper, I'm going to actually start typing this thing out. I'm going to start looking at the numbers. Week 4 comes around, you've got about 30 days typically, for the most part, for submission. Typically about 7 to 8 days before, you lose momentum, and then you start second guessing yourself and you tell yourself, no, I can't do it. You know, we really can't be competitive on this thing. You start talking yourself out of this. Some of you are sitting there and you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're talking yourself out of putting together this bid or this proposal. And you go, well, I got to let this one go. The reality is this: you've just wasted a 30-day window of being able to put together an actual proposal or a bid. Again, the challenge is developing the process. As simple as this slide is, this is it right here. So let me go through the cycle real quick, kind of talk through some points, and then kind of give you the big punch at the end and the analysis of this. So obtaining the RFP, self-explanatory, right? Whether you're on Caltrans, Cali Procure, Beta SAM, some municipality, some county website looking at these things, it's obtaining it. How much time are you going to take to actually obtain these requests for proposals, RFIs, whatever the case is? How much time are you spending per week actually mining these opportunities? Or are you sitting back just looking at your email and waiting for opportunities to blend in on that side? That's a consideration. Next thing is creating the requirements. Here's the stumbling block. You're going to look at a particular RFP and there's going to be very specific requirements. We need 2 projects with the same exact scope of work as your past performance. We need you to have a $5 million bonding capacity. We need you to have expert personnel with this type of resume. Whatever the case is, list out those requirements, okay? Next thing is self-explanatory, says read. What I would really challenge you to do is, once you get good at looking at these RFPs, you typically gloss right over into the scope of work and evaluation factors. Low bid, being open here, here's the timeline, whatever it is. At this particular stage, this is where you've got to read from front page to back page. And I know many of you may say, Renee, that's like 300 pages, 400 pages. What am I doing? There's no way that I'd just be able to do this. I'm going to challenge you. This is part of your process. Read it. Next step, supplying personnel. Even if you are a one-person shop right now, let's say you are the entire business, you're going to have to recruit a second pair of eyes to at least help you reading and supplying that alternate personnel on there. Meaning this: if you need somebody with a specific resume or somebody who actually does a scope of work that you don't handle, you've got to be having those conversations. This is where it takes alternate bodies, meaning, let's say there's a 20% of the scope of work that you don't do. You're going to subcontract, or you're going to partner with somebody who actually provides that. Guess what? They're going to have to be pulled into this process as well, where they've looked at the requirements, they've read it, they understand what you're doing to obtain that RFP. Next step, determining the go, no go. All this comes into play, and it's very specific on creating the requirements. Once you say, okay, I understand the requirements, I know we can do this, I have this, the alternate personnel, I have the subcontractors, I have all of this. Now I'm looking at a go, no go. It's as simple as this. When you make a decision, go or not to go, you have to stick with it. And here's the punch at the very end of this slide. The reasoning and the rationale that when you make a decision to put together a bid or a proposal and submit it, you have to follow it all the way through. The meaning being behind that is, let's say that you're not successful. Let's say that you come in 8th place out of 8 submissions, whatever the case is. When you are submitting those bids and those proposals, you want to be able to obtain debriefing information, any information that you can obtain. Now, again, You have a right to a debriefing, but if a debriefing just may be, well, listen, you were the high price and that's it. That's your debriefing. Yes, you're terrible on your numbers. Whatever it is, you need to be obtaining that information and looking at that information on the next proposal. Hopefully that makes sense. The other side of the coin, when you make a decision to no go, there are a lot of opportunities on the government contracting side. They come around pretty often. But when you make the decision to no go, you've got to not lose sleep about it and just move on. Because the reason being is this is what will keep you up. And especially if one of your competitors actually gets that contract, right? Where you said, man, I made the decision not to go. Oh my gosh, my competitor got it. And you're losing sleep, especially as a small business owner, right? You're saying, oh my gosh. Once you make the decision to no go, move on, let it go. Maybe that contract comes up in another 3 years, whatever the case is. Obviously, you're going to put that in your database, but make that decision, be very decisive on whether it's the go or the no go. Next slide, please. I'm running in short. Kevin, I know. I told you once I get going, forget it.
That's fine. I think we have some time.
All right, perfect. So we're going to have a couple questions. We're going to have a Q&A period after this, folks. If you've got questions, start typing them out. Start getting them down in this submission here so that we can see them, so I can answer your questions. This next slide is really just a couple bullet points and some best practices. Clearly describing your proposed solution, self-explanatory. What is the key to this bullet point is the second part that you're looking at here where it says exceeds the stated requirements. What you have to grasp as a government contractor is that you are exceeding requirements, exceeding expectations on a regular basis. At the end of the day, better, cheaper, and faster is what's going to win in government contracting. There is no doubt about it. We get a lot of clients that come to us and say, Renee, we're not the cheapest out there. We're absolutely not the cheapest out there. And I have to tell them, well, government contracting may not be for you because better, cheaper, and faster is exactly what they're looking for. So best approach is storyboarding. When you're looking at actually putting together a technical writing proposal, storyboard that thing. If you don't have a whiteboard, yellow legal notepad, whatever the case is, storyboard. And the way you storyboard, let me boil this down. You start at the end. This is what it looks like. Everything was completed. We were under time, under budget. Then you work backwards to the beginning. Okay, how did you become under time, under budget? Oh, we had expert personnel in place. We had all of our supplies lined up. We had lines of credit that were set, on day one of the contract, whatever it is, and you work backwards towards day one. That's just a project management strategy. And that specifically comes into play in proposal production. The rest of the bullet points, somewhat self-explanatory on that. Sticking to the message, clear and concise. The tendency when you start looking at some of these RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, whatever the case is, they're behemoth documents, right? Where you go, goodness gracious, 300, 500 pages, So what the human, especially if you're a one-person shop, the human in you is to say the expectation is, listen, they want something, that has great amount of volume on there. I know they got a page allocation, but I just want to make sure that I'm stuffing everything in there. Yes, I want to tell you about a contract I had 12 years ago that I did absolutely outstanding on. That's not in the requirements. Make sure you are clear and concise. Easily said, very difficult to do for the most part. Sticking to the page allocations. Self-explanatory. Listen, if you are that type of person that is 5 minutes late on a regular basis, guess what? The government contracting submission portion, you should not be in charge of that, okay? Because really, when you're looking at page allocations and you're looking at timing, how do you deliver this thing? The very first thing, we have a ton of analysts who do this on the back end at our firm. But the very first thing that we look at once we've gone through the go, no go, and we've decided, okay, this is a go. We're writing this proposal. We're getting ready for it. What we do is we come into a section called the submission process, meaning, is this a paper submission? Is it electronic submission? So those are big differences, right? Because if it's a paper submission, they're going to ask you, wow, we need 3 copies. We need it backed up on a disk. We need a thumb drive, and it needs to be delivered in Sacramento on this particular date and this particular time. You're in San Diego. So what you have to do is you have to come up with a timeline. Let's say you have 30 days, but now you're saying, well, listen, even if I overnight it, it's got to be there on a Monday. still got to get it overnight on Saturday, whatever the case may be. You're going to need to know when that thing needs to go to print. So all of this comes into play and just really being, extremely diligent on your timeline. And once timelines go beyond, you have some fail safes. So here's another great strategy. I talked about the timeline, making the go, no go checklist. Okay, you've decided to go, you get into that 10, 15 day mark and you're 10 days behind. There's just no way that you're going to be able to get this completed. The automatic reaction, get on your email, phone, contact that contracting official, say, hey, how about a 2-week extension? How about a 30-day extension? Now that may or may not happen, but the day to ask for an extension is not the day before it's due, because you make quite a few people angry, especially on the government side, when they're getting calls and emails the day before submission because they're ready for evaluation. And going, oh my gosh, at the 12th hour, all of a sudden you want an extension. What is that conveying to that agency? You're not very diligent in your management processes, right? This is back to the processes side. So I've given a lot of stuff. I know I've thrown a bunch out at you. Kevin, I'll apologize. I even set my timer because I know I'm terrible at this, but I'm at 19 minutes on that side. So Whitney's laughing. I can see you laughing at me, Whitney, but
This
yeah,
is perfect.
apologize.
This is great. This is great information.
So we'll roll into questions now. If you've got some questions, I don't know if I put everybody to sleep or they just turned off after some of the stuff I gave.
So I got one question, so we'll start with that, and everyone can feel free to either send questions in the chat to me or use the raise hand feature if you would rather ask it out loud. But somebody asks, if you lose a contract, what should you ask in the debrief?
Great question. Absolutely great question. So the first is looking at evaluation criteria. If it's just price, that's self-explanatory, right? Well, we were 20% over the winning bid. How do we get to that 20%? So price is always the key characteristic. And then as it flows down to evaluation criteria, was it that our personnel didn't have the correct resume? Was it our past performance? So it's a specific question. So to answer the question, it's very specific as to, listen, why did we lose? And maybe the feedback is you were high priced. That's it. Or maybe they looked at it and said, well, we weren't very confident that you could actually perform on this because you have no past performance. That's great, right? I mean, that's great feedback where you go, okay, maybe now I need a teaming partner with some past performance specifically in what we're looking to gain here. So it's just a very pointed question back on during the debrief. Listen, tell me how I can win. And for the most part, especially on the state side, we do a lot of contracts on the state side. You know, Caltrans is a large entity out there, but you have Department of General Services, which falls under all the other procurement in the state of California. Always remember this in the procurement process, because when you talk about procurement, you know, people look at it and they go, oh man, it's just this large, crazy market space out there on the internet looking at these RFPs. Always remember this, it boils down to human beings. At some point, there's a human being involved in that process, right? And I talk about this, especially with DBEs and small businesses in general. Listen, palms up approach, meaning you come in with the palms up, go, I don't know what to do. Help me out. Tell me how to win the next one. I appreciate anything that you can give me on that side. So I look at that. I mean, I use that to this day. Large federal contracts where just, you know, sometimes you eat crow because it looks like what you put together, maybe some 5-year-old kindergartner put together with a crayon, whatever the case is. And you just ask, hey, tell me how to be better at that point. So that was a long answer to a very short question on that side.
Great, thank you. Doesn't look like we have any others right now, but we can give people 30 seconds or so to think if they have any more questions.
So one quick reminder about the 1LA program, the 1LA initiative and the procurement program. Go to the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, look at the 1LA program. It's easy to Google, look in there. You know, we're coming to the end of the very first cohort. It's still up in the air whether or not they're going to have a secondary cohort. I'm being told yes, but we haven't necessarily solidified that as of yet, and when that will roll out or anything else. But I can tell you this, you know, we run a couple other programs out there, and you know, every time that we get courted to produce a program like this, I give the same speech to whoever is asking for this. We come in on a kickoff meeting. I said, listen, here's what I want. You tell me if that's in line of exactly what you're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, I want contracts in the hands of small businesses. Everybody says they want that, but really getting into the weeds of that, proposal production, cost analysis, project management, you know, getting into the weeds of the day-to-day of how to do that, that's where a lot of the programs out there, I've got to tell you, where I think they're trying to get you educated, small businesses, diverse businesses educated on that side, but the hand holding doesn't necessarily happen for the most part. That's one thing I'm very proud of with the One LA initiative. It's been quite a success. So we're extremely happy about that. You know, we're hoping that that becomes a model for other agencies out there to do that. And it helps our economy. I mean, everything else around there, you can talk about it, you know, how it really boosts everything else locally for you. Absolutely. So I don't know if we get any
And
questions
Renee,
after that.
you've had some good success in getting firms in that first cohort to actually get through the entire process to where they're now working on contracts for government entities. Is that correct?
That's correct. So just with Caltrans, we're probably right about $3 million in contract awards for the cohorts just in
Right.
this last 4 months. So, you know, we have one particular company that really just started before the One LA program rolled out. And it's small business, diverse business, husband and wife business. And, you know, we've really done really well with them. They're in a couple $1 million mark as far as contract award as well. So, you know, that's been something where, and I know, Kevin, you and I have talked about this, you know, the situation is you see the opportunities out there in the contracting world, government contracting world, but the reality is once you get to the doorstep and you actually get that contract award, typically that's where you're going to need the majority of your resources, because you're going to be flying blind, right? Where you go, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do. That's where you really need some help, understanding project management, understanding what you've got to focus on, delivering on that side. So that's always key.
Even getting that first invoice in and getting that first invoice paid is often an uphill battle for folks, just to make sure that you check all the boxes and everything.
Exactly.
Well, Renee, thank you so much for presenting. This has been great.
If we have time, I did get one more question.
Great, let's do it.
Just to remind everybody, I'm going to shoot my contact email address in the chat box if anybody wants to reach out. Go ahead, Whitney, I'm sorry.
No worries, that's great. Joseph asks, if I don't have past performance and want to team with another company, how do I find these companies? Do I talk to companies that I already know, or are there other avenues?
Great question. So let me take that question and go a step back. And I kind of talked about research. That's what our firm does, is really research opportunities and forecast opportunities, right? So let me give you a quick snapshot. 2 different databases, very specific here. When you look at usaspending.gov, what you're going to be able to do is take your NAICS codes, do the research, and you're going to see the specific spend in the federal government for what you do. Now, a portion of answering your question is this: those contract awards are going to be black and white, right on the page right there. And the good thing is you're going to see who that prime contractor is. So this is where you start building your database of who do I need to make contact with. I'm totally lost. I know what I do. I'm a cement layer. I have no idea. I can't do the framing. I can't do anything else. I need to find out who are the prime contractors who are out there who need me as a subcontractor. That's one of the steps, usaspending.gov. Great research point. I will give you the caveat there. Ton of data. When I talk about a ton of data, you can literally spend months and months on this website looking at data, past years data, and it's a lot for you, especially as a small business. But That one step right there that I just gave you, putting your NAICS codes in there, you're going to see who those prime contractors are. The good thing about that particular website, it'll break it down geographically as well, where you can break it down into the Western United States, even further, Los Angeles County, Riverside, the Tri-County area, San Bernardino, whatever the case is. On the state side, to where the place to find the actual contract awards and good information is FizCal. So when you go to Cali Procure, you'll see FizCal there. What you're going to see is you're going to see some of those past contracts, and you're going to start developing, okay, who do I need to be in contact with? And then the next step is, so those are the two data points, and there's a ton of them, you know, other strategy out there to develop those, but there's two data points right there. But here's what I would profess to you is your strategy there, because the next question should be, well, how do I create value to that prime contractor or even to that teaming partner who wants to take me on? What is your certification? How many certifications do you have? Are you sure that the agency that you're targeting really needs that particular certification? Maybe you're a DBE, but yet that particular district, District 7, District 4, 12, whatever it is, they're doing 48% DBE. Are you really creating some value there? So this is where it's going to take some self-reflection and say, okay, what is my value? You know, am I better, cheaper, and faster? That's a possibility. So those are two different strategies right there that you should be doing on a monthly basis, just keeping track of who's getting contract awards and who's out there that I may need to outreach to.
Great. That's super helpful. Thank you so much, Renee. Renee put his contact information in the chat, and there's also, it's up on the screen right now. And as I indicated earlier, we'll be sending out a copy of this presentation to everyone who's in attendance in the next day or two. So thanks so much, Renee. Thanks for telling us about your great work with 1LA.